It's great to see that Uber now warns users to always check the license plate before getting into a car. But my story happened about a year before that was put in place. A few friends and I were spending New Year's Eve at a house party. The New Year hit, the party was winding down, and my friend ordered an Uber. Mind you, all 4 of my companions were some combination of pissed drunk or baked out of their minds. I was decently buzzed, but by far the most sober of the group, and assumed the role of mom friend by corralling the group to the street to wait for the car. It was freezing, pitch black, and the street was completely empty. A car pulled up and my friend announced that it was our Uber, so everyone started to make their way over. Out of nowhere, I get this sick feeling in my gut. My lizard brain kicks into overdrive and tells me to get the hell away from that car. That's when I realized the car was missing an Uber sticker. Since my friend was too drunk to care, I grabbed her phone to check the license plate. This wasn't our Uber. I realized this at the same moment that my friend walked to the driver's side of the window to ask if this was the Uber for Sarah. It was a fake name, and he told her that he was. I yelled to her that this was the wrong car, but she was too gone to care. "But he says he's our driver," she slurred. I channeled my inner camp counselor and yelled to her that this was not our driver, and that the car had the wrong license plate. Instead of walking away from the car, she asked him why the license plate was different if he was here for Sarah. And I shit you not, this fucker tells her that he put the wrong license plate on the car this morning, and she was so drunk that she believed him and almost opened the door to get inside. I yelled at her, "Get the fuck away from the car right now, because that is not our driver." Finally, she starts to walk away, but the driver grabs her arm and tries to force her in. The friend next to Sarah pulls her away, but the guy looked visibly unhinged at this point and ordered her to get in the car. The first thing I could think to do was take my phone out and start filming the car and yell, "Hey asshole, I'm filming you." This got his attention, and he was down the street before I could say another word. Not a second later, our real Uber pulls up. We were all spooked, but they were drunk, tired, and ready to let it go to keep the good vibe going. All I could think of was some drunk girl leaving a party alone and forgetting to check the license plate. So, as the only one who wanted to do something, and also the only one under 21, I decided to call the cops. Not great in hindsight, but I'd rather get busted for being just shy of 21 and kind of buzzed than let someone get possibly kidnapped and whatever else. It all turned out just fine, and they caught the guy before he could find another victim. But we never found out what his motive was, or what happened after that. The best part of the entire ordeal, though, was the one guy in our group and his reaction. I've known him since kindergarten, he's one of the smartest people I know. But he was so cross-faded that he actually believed the guy was just a nice dude trying to help us out. He tried to convince me not to call the cops, because it would only ruin the guy's night. And it was New Year's, so he should have fun. He still vehemently denies this ever happened. In conclusion, always check your Uber's license plate. This past summer for my graduation gift, my mom and grandma took me to Alberta to go watch the Spruce Meadows Masters Tournament. If you don't know what that is, it's one of the world's largest horse shows. We flew out there, so we decided to use Uber to get to and from the show grounds. We don't have Uber where I'm from, but everyone said that Uber drivers in the area were awesome. For the first 3 days, the drivers were great. They picked us up within 5 or so minutes and got us there in 15 minutes tops. The cars were clean and safe. That detail is important. On day 4, we called for an Uber 45 minutes before the time we wanted to be picked up at 9:30 a.m. 10 a.m. rolled around, and we thought we'd give it another 10 minutes before calling for another driver. At 10:05-ish, the original driver comes. In his profile, it said he was driving a 2017 Dodge Journey, but when he got there, it was definitely the right guy, but he was in an old, run-down-looking beater. My first instinct was to go up to the driver window and ask him to roll it down. Before I could ask him his name, just to check to make sure and ask him what happened to the car the app said he would be driving, he almost shouted at me in a very angry tone. "Yes, I'm your driver. This is my sister's car, mine's in the shop. Now get in, ladies, I have another rider waiting." I was shocked and scared already at this point. I looked at my mom and grandma, and they said to just get in, so I did. I sat in the back with my grandma, and my mom sat in the front. We told him where we needed to go, and we were on our way. He had taken a different route that he claimed was quicker. On the highway in Calgary, 15 minutes is already pretty fast. 15 to 20 minutes had passed, and he had been chatting up my mom in a very flirtatious way the whole ride. He had taken us into the countryside that seemed to be forever away from wherever we were going. It was actually the opposite direction, and I asked him if he knew where he was going, and if we can get back onto the highway. He ignored me and kept driving. Another 10 minutes passed, and I was freaking the hell out. My mom was obviously quite uncomfortable as well, and we were still in the countryside. He pulls over on the side of the road, and we just sat there for a solid 5 or 6 minutes. At this point, I was shaking and had to hold my grandma's hand. The driver turned around to put his hand on my leg, but I quickly shift away, and then he proceeds to look at all three of us and say, "I'm sorry for the long ride, ladies. I know I've gone out of the way, but you're all too beautiful for me to let you leave out so soon." What the fuck, dude? I wanted to get out of the car. We all sat there in silence, and all I could think was, holy fuck, this guy's going to kill us. He made another creepy remark towards me, commenting on how youthful and full of life I am. Some really serial killer stuff. After sitting there in shock for what felt like hours, my sweet quiet grandma screamed at him, telling to turn around and get back on the highway. He finally pulled off to the side of the road and continued on the country road. The whole way he kept looking back at me and making increasingly sexual remarks. About an hour and a half later, we got to the grounds. I was extremely shaken up and almost in tears. I wish we had just called another Uber. I hope he doesn't do this to all his female passengers. I will never be taking a rideshare again. This happened to me a few years ago. It was New Year's Eve, and I had just been out in the city to celebrate with 3 of my closest girlfriends. At the end of the evening, when we were all exhausted and ready for bed, one of our friends traveled to her house near the club, while the others made the hour-long trek back to our home suburb. There were 3 of us together, all females. The trip to our suburb typically involved a 45-minute-long bus trip, and then an Uber or taxi to our houses. I've lived in the area my entire life, and I'm very familiar with the most convenient way to get to and from my house. On this particular evening, we got off the bus, and I booked an Uber with my phone. It was around 4 a.m., so you can imagine our remote town had very little road traffic at this time. A car pulls up at the bus stop, as this was the first car we had seen since arriving, and no one else was around except us. We assumed it was our ride, and got in. Our Uber driver was a Russian man with a very thick accent, although he didn't speak a lot. Immediately I noticed that he was taking us in the wrong direction of my house, but I figured it's fine. Sometimes GPS takes drivers on different routes. I brushed off the thought. Then 10 minutes later, I get a text message that my Uber driver is arriving at my pickup destination. I looked at the driver beside me, angry that I was too tired or intoxicated to remember the text message you received before your ride pulls up, but also terrified that I may have gotten my 2 best friends and myself into a vehicle with a man we didn't know at all. My actual Uber driver then tried to call me, presumably to find out where we were, but I ignored the call, not wanting to alert the man who had actually picked us up. At that point, I still hadn't said anything to my best friends, but I asked the driver if he will stop at a service station so I can grab a drink of water before we continue the journey, because I felt sick. He questioned me. "We aren't far from your destination now." But I insisted, so he agreed. When we arrived at the service station, I asked my friends to get out with me, desperately, and they obliged. I explained the situation to them, and we all agreed to tell the driver that we were going to walk to a friend's house nearby, and not to worry about the rest of the trip. He seemed frustrated, and insisted he take us, but we refused to get back in the car. We ended up getting a cab back home from there. So, Uber driver who may have not actually been an Uber driver, let's not meet.